All right. Good morning, everyone who's able to watch us live. We appreciate it. And thank you to all who are watching us on the recording. Good afternoon, good evening to you, whatever time you are in right now. I'm Ian Foster, and this is My Empowered Political Life for June 18th, 2025. Thank you for joining us. So I was this morning, I've been doing a lot of updates on the Israel-Iran war. I was going to do another update on that. I decided to wait a day because events are now moving very quickly there. And there's a good chance that by the time you watch this, whatever I discussed today about Israel and Iran could be out of date. So we're going to give it another day or two to settle down and get a better feel for where things are going. But it's still very hostile. It is still what I would call a war. Israel is still pounding the heck out of Iran. And the United States now is possibly closer than ever to getting involved in that war in a kinetic fashion, not just a logistical support, but actual combat. So let's let that settle down. So instead, today, we're going to talk about ICE agents arresting Brad Lander. This is the comptroller of New York City and a candidate for mayor in New York City. He's probably not going to win. There are a couple of candidates, including former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who are at the top of the list, but he could come in third or fourth. And given that New York City has ranked choice voting, you never know what might happen to a third or fourth place candidate. So he's a legit candidate, the New York City comptroller, Mr. Lander. Mr. Lander, just as a little background, he likes to go to federal courthouses to the immigration hearings, and then he does what he escorts the immigrants out of the courthouse. It's not really clear what is meant by escort. It's not as though he's armed. It's not as though he's fighting people off or anything. It appears that he simply links arms with the immigrant and walks out of the courthouse with them. That's the extent of his escorting. He does this frequently. So yesterday, Mr. Lander was doing this escort of an immigrant out of the federal courthouse in New York City. Again, he simply linked arms with the gentleman and started to walk out of the courthouse. And then some ICE agents nearby, or what we believe to be ICE agents anyway, we'll get to that in a second, were overheard saying, "Should we arrest the comptroller?" Now, we'll come back to that in a second. That turns out to be a key fact here. They're talking together and people overhear them saying, "Should we arrest the comptroller?" So then a few men wearing plain clothes approach the comptroller. Three men wearing plain clothes. They are unidentified. Two of them wearing masks and hats. And they just start grabbing the comptroller and manhandling him and roughing him up and handcuffing him and marching him off in a very rough, unnecessarily rough manner. Now, the comptroller and all the people around who are videoing this, and we will drop links to video below so you can look at it for yourself. I'm not just, you don't have to trust me. We'll drop links to the video so you can check it out. These three men, they were repeatedly asked by the comptroller and bystanders to identify themselves. They would not identify themselves. They would not show badges. They wouldn't say who they worked for. They were asked, what are the charges? They wouldn't say what the charges were. They were asked for an arrest warrant. They would not produce an arrest warrant. And they did not read him his Miranda rights. So we already, as a arrest or detention sort of activity, have a lot of legal problems with what's going on. And now, again, we do believe these were, after the fact, it does appear they were ICE agents, even though they were wearing plain clothes and refused to identify themselves and say who they worked for. It does seem they were ICE agents. Now, here's the key. By law, ICE agents cannot arrest U.S. citizens. Not allowed to do that. ICE is a law enforcement agency, but it's a law enforcement agency of very limited jurisdiction. It's not like the FBI. It's not like your local police force. They are not law enforcement of general jurisdiction to stop people and arrest people for crimes when they see crimes happening. They're law enforcement of limited jurisdiction. They can arrest and detain immigrants whose lawful status is in question. They are not allowed to arrest United States citizens. Now, the objection here that, well, maybe they didn't know he was a U.S. citizen. This is where it goes back to the conversation I said I wanted to get back to. They were heard beforehand discussing whether they should arrest the comptroller of the city of New York. So they knew who he was. They can't claim they didn't know. They were overheard talking about it. They knew who he was. And they went and did it anyway. So there are multiple layers of illegality here. And again, we get back to the issue of masked, plainclothes men who refuse to identify themselves arresting U.S. citizens when they're not really doing much, if anything, wrong. How is the U.S. citizen supposed to know that these are government officials when they won't show badges, they won't identify themselves, no warrant, no charges, no Miranda rights? They're just masked men grabbing you and roughing you up. How do we know they're not mob? How do we know they're not drug kingpins? How do we know they're not petty criminals? Now, in this case, it does appear after the fact they were federal agents. DHS has admitted as much. But how is the person supposed to know that in the moment? We've talked about this a lot on this channel of the problem that presents for the average person on the street when masked men accost you. And they could say they're federal agents, but how are you supposed to know that? If they can't identify themselves, don't read you your rights, don't charge you, anything like that. So that's not a great situation. Now, there were some other people who did appear to be wearing identification as police or law enforcement of some kind, sort of standing back and watching the whole thing. One appeared to be a New York City police officer. Now, me, if I'm NYPD, I'm thinking I'm troubled that unidentified masked men are accosting the city's comptroller and just taking him off with no due process and no rights and nothing like that. That, to me, as far as I know, that looks like a kidnapping. There were other men nearby in full-on military tactical gear in a federal courthouse, which is a little strange. It's a pretty secure building, but it said police on it. I don't know that they were police. I suspect they were ICE. I'm not a big fan of ICE wearing tactical gear that says police because they aren't police. They are not like police. They are law enforcement with very limited duties and limited jurisdiction. They are not police of general law enforcement jurisdiction. So I'm not a fan of them wearing stuff that says police on it when they're not police. Now, it looks like the comptroller is not going to be charged so far. We shall see. Department of Homeland Security put out a statement saying he was arrested because he assaulted police officers. They're saying that's why he was arrested. Now, again, I will post links to videos. You can watch it. I don't see any evidence at all that he ever assaulted a police officer, and I'm not sure why he even would. So that appears to be totally made up. This is part of our, we've done some segments, Lies and the Lying Liars Who Tell Them. They are telling you not to believe your lying eyes. You can watch the video. You can see he does not assault police officers. He is just grabbed and roughed up and dragged off. He did not go out and start assaulting police officers and then they grabbed him. No, they just grabbed him first. So and this is sort of like, sometimes I don't understand these sort of lies, right? So DHS puts out this statement that contradicts what we can all see on the video with our own eyes. They know they're lying. We know they're lying. They know that we know they're lying. And so I think, what is the point of the lie? But I do know the point of the lie. The point is there is a certain audience who will simply believe the DHS statement and not watch the video for themselves. So that's why I'm going to post the links below, and you can make up your own mind about whether you think the comptroller assaulted police officers. I don't know why he would. He's also, like I said, a mayoral candidate. There's no reason for him to do that. Now, if you want to argue that by linking arms with an immigrant who may or may not have been illegal, but who was in the federal courthouse going through his due process rights, if you want to argue that linking arms with him was obstructing federal law enforcement in some way, and therefore a crime in the strictest technical sense, we can make that argument. I can certainly make a straight-faced argument that he was committing a crime in the most technical sense. It is also just about the most minor of crimes in this sort of situation. And if these were ICE agents, all they had to do was walk up to him, show their badges, identify themselves, say, we're from ICE. We have a order from an immigration judge to deport this person. And so, Mr. Comptroller, we need you to step back so we can do our job. That's all they had to do. Or they could have said, we can walk into the immigration judge's office and have a talk about this. That's all they had to do. Instead, they just talk about arresting him, and then they grab him and rough him up and march him off in handcuffs with no identification, no warrant, no charges, no nothing like that. And it does appear he's not going to be charged with a crime. We shall see, but so far he's not. It seems like the U.S. attorney in SDNY is doing the wise thing and not charging him with a crime, because the moment they go into court with this video, the case is going to be dismissed and the U.S. attorney is going to look like a jerk. And U.S. attorneys in SDNY and other districts are already looking silly in front of courts, bringing silly cases and having judges basically ask them, what are we doing here? We don't understand this. And I think they're tired of getting reamed out by judges over the last couple of months. So hopefully he's not charged. But this is part of a pattern. Last week, we talked about Senator Padilla, who clearly was identified as a U.S. senator, was known to be a U.S. senator, and again was manhandled, roughed up, not charged, not read any rights, nothing like that. Uh, didn't really do anything wrong except perhaps rudely interrupt the secretary, which is really not the sort of crime that deserves that sort of treatment. It happens at press conferences all the time. So this is a disturbing pattern. It's getting worse. Pay attention to this stuff. If you see it, film it. People ask, what can I do? If you see it, film it, post it, live stream it, even, so that in case your phone is confiscated or damaged in some fashion, get on Facebook, Instagram, whatever you use, live stream it so that the video is out there for the world to see, so that people can make up their own minds about what happens, and so the government cannot simply lie about what happens and get away with it. So watch for this, and don't be afraid when you see this happening to say, who are you? Where's your arrest warrant? Where's your badge? Who do you work for? Do all that on the live stream. Make it clear that these folks are not following the law when they make these arrests. So thanks so much, everyone, for watching. We will see you soon.